So this is my land lesson for Cancel 3 and 4, describing persistent, oscillating, and geographical wind shifts. So can you describe to me what you think an oscillating wind shift is?
An oscillating wind shift would be a wind that moves around. It's not like a west wind that's straight, it would move around a bit.
Well, you're sort of close. It's more of a pendulum sort of act. It moves back and forth from one degree to another degree, and it does that repeatedly. Sean, what do you think a persistent wind shift is? Think of the word persistent. What does it mean? Well, persistent means it doesn't stop, like it's persistent, so...
So when it doesn't stop?
Yeah, it goes in one direction and it doesn't stop moving in that one direction. So it continues on shifting in the one direction. What do you think a geographical wind shift would be, Nana?
Geographical, going from 1 degree to another. So if you were sailing at a straight line and you were going to change, you would change 180 degrees?
Sort of. Geographical wind shift is more of objects and that create low pressure and high pressure areas where the wind has to move around them, creating high pressure on the moving around, making there two different wind paths. One that's going, say there's a big mountain here. One wind will go this way and another wind will go that way. And it'll create two high pressure spots and one low pressure spot right behind the mountain. So that is this. Oscillating wind shifts, when you are sailing, they switch back and forth. It's like a pendulum, like a metronome. You will either get lifted or knocked, and lifted or knocked means like you will either be able to head up closer towards the wind where the wind was, and you'll be able to head closer towards the mark, or you'll be knocked, and knocked means you'll be knocked back down and you'll have to point lower, and you'll have to do a longer tack. Really good indicators of these are wind shifts waves. Little ripples in the water especially, because if you see a group of little ripples coming in towards you, it usually indicates wind shift either is coming from that direction. Wind shifts can be, oscillating wind shifts can usually come in and out of phase, so like out of a pattern. Usually they're in a pattern, but there'll be the occasional one where it's not in a pattern. So, persistent wind shifts. Persistent wind shifts are where the wind keeps on shifting farther and farther to one direction. You will begin to you will get lifted, and you have to keep on. If the wind is going left, you'll have to go left initially. You usually want to tack before your ley line, which is like your line that you want to go. It'll either let you tack before it, usually, or after it. Geographical wind shifts, they create high and low pressure areas. So say there's a big building, like you're sailing in an area around Toronto, and there's big buildings in the way of where you're sailing. They'll create low pressure areas right behind the buildings, and this will have a really big effect if you're racing or something and you have to go by one of those buildings, because it'll be a really slow spot. But before and after the building, there'll be areas where the wind is has gone around them, like here. These areas right around here, they're high pressures, and they will push your boat. Right here is where the wind will be going. So it'll have a completely different tack, and you'll have a completely different ley line on that area. And then in here, there'll be hardly any wind. And then here, you'll have like a harder or a different tack again. It'll be a few degrees more than the other tack. And this can really affect your sailing. And that is my lesson. So let's say, and for geographical wind shifts, they also land masses like the sun, or during the night, it gets really cold because there's no sun, right? For geographical wind shifts, when land is warmer because it can absorb the heat faster than water can, it'll create warm air in the land areas and colder air where there's water. And warm air really wants to push colder air out of the way. So it's going to create a higher pressure over the water where there's should be cold, where it's cold. And the warm air will create a persistent wind shift because it'll be pushing that cold air out. Understand?
The geographic high pressure and low pressure there, depending on how you're coming from behind that particular building to the front of the building, how much would you have to move away or tack away from the high, or would you be tacking towards the high pressure?
Well, it's not really tacking. Say you're coming this direction, like you're coming here.
Yeah.
This is your line for your boat.
Yep.
Except for you're not going through the building. The wind will shift here, so you will have to adjust your sails for the wind. And this here, or in this direction. But then the wind will also be pushing a different direction here because it'll be wanting to come around and it'll hug the building. So then you'll have to adjust your sails again once you get past the dead zone area here. So you'll have to switch your sails from here, and then you'll have to switch your sails again here, and then after that the wind should go back to just being here.
Normal.
Yeah.
Like a persistent.
Yeah. So it'll create like an obstacle in the wind, so it'll shift and.
So you'll lose wind in your sail, which
Yes.
is why you're going to have to do something to it.
Yes. So let's say you find yourself that you're able to point higher all of a sudden. Would that be either you're all of a sudden able to point yourself higher, and then it's in a couple minutes after you've pointed yourself higher, you get knocked again, and then a couple minutes later you find yourself to be able to point higher. What kind of wind shift would that be?
Oscillating?
Yes, very good. But let's say you find yourself that you're getting knocked repeatedly. You're having to point lower and lower and lower. What kind of wind shift would that be, Sean?
Persistent.
Good job. What about if you find that yourself that there is a large building or large landmass in the way, or in your area, and it is stopping the wind? What kind of wind shift?
It's a geographic wind shift.
Yes.
It could be a building, it could be,
Well, I hope
as
it's
you've
not a building.
well, because I worked in downtown Toronto, that shows a very good example of how you can stand in the middle of those tall buildings and the wind changes dramatically.
It's very good to relate
Mhm.
a relationship.
It's like a wind tunnel.
Yeah. So that is my land lesson for today. Yeah.
Questions?
Any questions?
I don't have any questions.
Sean, do you have a question?
No.
Well, that's why I didn't ask. And that is the end of my land lesson. Now let's get to the water lesson.
Thank you for the time.
Press it off, Mom.